Hey everyone, it's Nikki from Finding Our Power Together. Welcome to episode 2 of Building Our Bundle. Today we're going to be talking about developing a practice for emotional regulation and self-care. So our emotions are our feelings, but they're also ways that our spirits and our bodies communicate with us. So they're not inherently good or bad, they just are. They just are our reactions, our natural instinctual reactions to stimuli that happens all around us. And our emotions are impacted by so many different factors. They're informed by our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, our experiences, our emotional state. And our emotional state is impacted by so many things as well. And so we're going to talk about how that happens within our physical vessel and how sometimes our emotions are actually the ways that our bodies are trying to communicate a need with us. Our emotions aren't something we can really control. They just happen, and really what we can control is how we react to them or how our behavior is shaped by them. And a way that I've really started to think about emotions in my own life is around that Anishinaabe worldview of Dwewin, or heart truth. You know, in our language, that word is our word for truth, but it's also the word that means the sound our heart makes. So our emotions are always true, they're always valid, they're always trying to tell us a truth that exists within us. But as human beings, we have thoughts, we have all of these other things going on, and sometimes we misinterpret the truth that is coming out. This is where emotional regulation comes in, because as human beings, we have that gift of choice. We get to choose how we act in response to the emotions that are coming out. We can't control how we feel, but we can control what we choose to do with that feeling. So emotional regulation is a skill that we can build. We can develop this practice of, trying to understand our emotions and act appropriately. So emotional regulation really has to do with a combination of skills. First, we need to understand to identify our emotions. Understanding our emotions can help us to then regulate how we behave. Emotional regulation is really about modifying our emotional behaviors. So it's not to say that we don't experience feelings. Obviously, we're always going to feel things, but our moderation comes in how we act. Emotional regulation can also help us to self-soothe when we're experiencing those really intense emotions, those really intense feelings. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but learning to understand our emotions and our behaviors can actually help us to kind of calm down a little bit and kind of be able to soothe ourselves when we are experiencing those really intense moments of emotional upset. Emotional regulation also allows us to kind of cope ahead and reduce our emotional upset in the future because we're able to tend to ourselves. We're able to understand what we need in the moment and actually give ourselves that, rather than relying on the external environment. Emotions are always valid and emotions are always truth. It's just a matter of how we are interpreting them. Are we interpreting them as how they are truly intended to be received, or we are interpreting them through the lens of feeling angry or upset or emotional? When we are emotionally vulnerable is when we are leaving ourselves open to emotional upset. This isn't to say that we need to close off and protect ourselves at every moment of every day, but really we do need to sort of have protections around us to ensure that we're not just leaving ourselves open to being upset every single day. Some ways that we, maybe inadvertently put ourselves at risk is when we're staying in toxic relationships or staying in toxic environments, when we're always being surrounded by that toxic environment. Really, that sort of creates a system where we're always being reactive to things, and we might be emotionally erratic because of it. When we act in ways that also don't align with our values or our true selves, we also put ourselves in emotional vulnerability. When you snap at a friend, the next day you might feel a little bit down because you were acting in a way that you didn't want to. And so when we act in line with our values, we feel strong, we feel confident, and that allows us to feel emotionally safe. When we reject reality, we are also putting ourselves at risk because we might inadvertently be denying something is happening when it really is. Instead, we can protect ourselves by really practicing that radical acceptance and practicing that understanding of self in relation to the environment. And one other piece that really is important to understanding emotional vulnerability is when we're not practicing self-care. When we're not taking care of ourselves, that's when we sort of get into these places where we're getting really snappy or we're getting really emotional and upset because we're not prioritizing ourselves. And when we're not prioritizing ourselves, our body's going to send us all of these messages, and then we're going to interpret them in ways that might feel negative. Again, we can't control our emotions, but we can control our behaviors. And there are certain behaviors that help us to shield up, that help protect us. to make sure that we aren't emotionally vulnerable. One of those skills can be understood as the pleased skill. So pleased is an acronym to help us remember those basic behaviors that help to protect us from emotional vulnerability. It makes emotion regulation easier because when we're taking care of ourselves, we can be sure that we are not acting purely out of being tired or being hungry or being unhappy within our body. We can know that those emotions that are coming up are actually because we are feeling something deeply. And then we can properly decide how we're going to behave. So please stands for physical health, illness treatment, eat balanced meals, avoid mood-altering drugs, sleep balance, exercise, and doing them daily. Taking care of our body, taking care of our vessel, it might seem like it's really basic, but sometimes we forget. Sometimes we need that reminder. And, oftentimes when we are helping other people, our own self-care is the first thing to go. This week in Building Our Bundle, the live session, our uncle RJ was sharing how the skill really reminded him of those teachings of the Ogichita. And Ogichita is a word in Anishinaabe that means warrior. And when we think about a warrior, we really think of someone who's strong, who's brave, who's, always out there taking care of the people. But really that word translated into English means the one with the big heart. And so when we think about that, when we think about having that big heart, we are, feeling things deeply all of the time. And when you have a big heart, you also need to appropriately understand what those feelings are. And you sometimes need to protect yourself. You sometimes need to warrior up. You need to shield up. And how we do that is through self-care. When we take care of ourselves first, it can radiate onto other people. It can then open up the possibility of us helping other people around us. But it's really hard to be a warrior when you're not protecting yourself first, because as soon as you go into battle, you might be the first one down. So please skills, or any of those self-care skills that really allow us to prioritize ourselves, take that time, ensure that we're, checking those boxes, that we're taking care of our vessel, we're taking care of our spirits, we're taking care of our minds, can help to shield us, to help us to be that warrior, that helper in our community, because we are taking care of ourselves first. This week, I encourage you to practice the please skill, and even think of the other kinds of behaviors that help you to nourish your body and nourish your vessel. Maybe there are other things that are not included on this list, and feel free to add them. But just take 1 week to really try to prioritize your physical health, your treating of illness if you have one, eating right, avoiding drugs or substances, sleeping well, exercising, and doing these things on a daily basis. I want you to spend time reflecting each day. It doesn't have to be long, even just 5 minutes at the end of the day, to reflect on what did you feel that day? How were your moods? And then how were you doing on all of these skills? There's no judgment here in terms of how much or how little you're doing any of these skills. This is just for you. This is for you to begin to understand where you might need to be prioritizing yourself a little more, and how these, really basic self-care skills can help to shape your mood. We have offered some trackers for you to use, but feel free to use any kind of tracker that really works for you. Sometimes we just need to do this in kind of a robotic kind of way in order to remind ourselves to do them. And once we do them on a consistent basis, then we form a habit, and then we don't need to have those systems in place anymore. So please reflect on how you're feeling. Are there barriers to you engaging with any of these skills? How could you reduce those barriers? And really, what does self-care mean to you? What does it mean to warrior up and to take care of yourself so you can take care of those around you? We'd love to hear from you in the comments section about how this has been working for you. And please join us next week. If you'd like to join our live session, there's still space available. Just register on our website. Otherwise, we'll see you next week with another video. Bamapi for now.